Hello, everyone. Could we have your attention, please? Sorry. We are about to start the formal part of tonight's proceedings. As I explained, I'm standing in for the president, who's out of Tokyo at the moment. I'll just say a few words of introduction, and then we will invite people to come up and pay their individual tributes. So anyone, please feel free to say a few words, no matter how few, in Japanese or in English. As you know, we're here tonight. We are here this evening to pay tribute to the memory of our much loved and respected friend and colleague, Bob Kirschenbaum, who passed away on November the 29th at the age of 87. Bob had been a member of this club for an incredible 60 years. Rokujunen, unbelievable, really, which is a lifetime in itself for some people. He joined the FCC back in 1963. The length of his membership is not technically a record, but unlike that of some other long-standing members, Bob's membership and presence at this club was continuous right from the day he joined. He'd been in failing health for some time, but he didn't let that deter him from coming almost every day to this club, which was in effect his second home. I think that's the most accurate description I can give. In more recent years, unfortunately, he came with the aid of a walking stick and later in a wheelchair until near the close of his life, when he entered various hospitals and then a care home in Saitama, where he passed away. Those of us who visited Bob during that time when he was in hospital were always very impressed by his invariable good cheer and his inevitable friendliness. He seemed almost to care more about the club than he did about his own personal health. He always asked about how the club was doing, and especially the food and beverage activities. He was, as you probably know, for 17 years or more, chair of the FCCJ Food and Beverage Committee, in the days when that committee was a very important and direct link between the members and our F&B staff, and then with our outsourced F&B providers. But Bob was so much more than just an F&B chair. During his 6 decades of membership, he was a friend, a counsellor, and a helper to so many of us. I think many of us thought of him as Uncle Bob. He'd become so much a part of the FCCJ that it's difficult to imagine the club without him, without his warm smile, his genial manner, and his friendship and courtesy toward everyone, members, guests, and staff alike. It's fitting, I think, that this memorial should be taking place on a Friday, because Friday night was Bob's night. So too, of course, were our Saturday night live events, but week in, week out, month in, month out, and year in and year out, Bob was a fixture at what we like to call the Friday night Benkyo-kai, or Benkyo-kais, where a group of regular and associate members would invariably gather in the main bar in the Uracho Denki building at first, and later a smaller number in the FCCJ's current premises. At these so-called Benkyo-kais, we practice the art of good conversation, drinking good wines, and generally enjoying welcoming warmth and clubbiness. Bob, of course, was a connoisseur of good wines, and it was good that even in his final days he was still able to enjoy his favourite Villa Maria, Sauvignon Blanc white wine, and his Malbec red wines. He lived a very full and worthwhile life, and if I were allowed only 3 words in which to describe Bob, I would say that he was a good man. That may sound a bit inadequate, but the word good can mean so many things. It can mean simply kind and generous to others. Bob was certainly that. It can mean a person of honesty and integrity. Bob was certainly that too. Or it can mean someone who does well by others and who is fair-minded and upright. Bob was all of those things and much more. I could go on for a long time, but I'm pretty sure that others are eager to step up and pay their tributes. more of Bob's life and his work will emerge in the course of these tributes, I'm sure. And I'm going to invite as the first person to make a presentation, Torrin Boyd, who's here to my right, who was one of Bob's very best friends and helpers in good times and in bad. He was a true friend, in fact. And he'll be showing us a very interesting photo shoot of Bob's life. But before I do that, I'd like to propose a toast to Bob. And I won't say rest in peace, because Bob was never somebody who would rest when there was still work to be done. So what I would like to say is go in peace, Bob, and God bless you as you continue your journey. So if I'd like to raise glasses, Kempai. So Torrin Boyd will now take over. Please, Torrin.
Thanks, Anthony. That was beautiful. Just a second here. Oop. Please stand by for technical difficulties. Here we go. There we go. Okay, I wanted to show everybody a series of photos about Bob and his life, starting from a very young childhood age all the way up until the very last few years of his life. So I'm going to first start out with this picture of him. He's age 2 years old. And that's the same smile that already is right there. I mean, okay. This is him in 1945 in April with his father and his mother. His birthday was on April 9th, so it's possible, I can't say for sure, but this might be his birthday picture. This is Bob and his mother, and she's holding Bob's baby brother, David. They had an 11-year age difference, but you can tell Bob looks really happy to have a new brother. This is Bob, and probably in his late teens. That's his father, and that's his brother David. Obviously out at a beach or something. David looks to be probably 11, 12 years old as well, so I would imagine this picture's in the late 1950s. That's Bob and his mother, and I think this was probably just before Bob was leaving home for good to go out and conquer the world. He joined the Air Force, and one of the reasons why he came to Japan, and he was stationed at Tachikawa Air Force Base, where he headed up the base newspaper, and that was pretty much the start of his journalism and publishing career in Japan that went on for a very long time. Here's a variant picture, great picture of Bob. If anybody ever makes a book about him, this should be the cover photo. This is Bob. Very meager beginnings in Japan. I don't know what year it is, but you can just look at his age. You can tell that he probably hadn't been here long, striking out on his own. This is taken in Hakone. I don't know where, but this is the only time I've seen a photo of Bob holding a camera, because he always told me that he never wanted to be a photographer, and he never had any ability to do it, but obviously he was taking pictures on snapshots just like we do with our phones now, I guess. I don't know the year on this picture, but Bob's got to be in his early to mid-20s, I'm thinking. Bob, again, out in Hakone. This is at a different time, so he had some kind of passion for going there. That's Ashinoko in the background. This is his press badge with the United Nations to cover Korea. This is dated August 63. Bob was, at the very beginning, when he just really started getting serious about marketing and promotion and sales and all that kind of stuff, he had a company called Kirschenbaum International, and one of their very first major clients was Tupperware. And I think this is Tupperware honoring him. It says our ad man in Japan, so it's my guess. I don't know for sure. This is Bob in one of his early offices, and if you notice the newspaper on the table there says "Vote." That's #1 Shimbun, and it's an article about the upcoming elections in the club. Why it says Sydney in the background, I don't know. So Bob, with his company Pacific Press Images, as everybody knows as PPS, his main thing was a photo agency, and he was representing photographers, and he was representing Magnum in Japan, Magnum Photos, the legendary photo agency. But he finally caught on to this idea of doing photo exhibitions. And his very first exhibition was in 1974, and he told me this was his very first one. This exhibition was called The Concerned Photographer, which was, he worked closely with Cornell Kappa, who was Robert Kappa's brother, but as you can see, some of the photographers on this page is Eugene Smith, there's Gordon Parks, Don McCollum. So this was a very serious exhibition, and Bob had set out to be a cultural bridge between the West, the world and Japan, about introducing photography into this country. One of his very first major projects was with Robert Kappa. And he worked closely, he was working with Magnum at the time. Like I said, the PPS office was basically Magnum Japan. And any of the photographers were allowed to come there and use the office. So it was kind of like the de facto Magnum Photos office. So he did this big thing with Robert Kappa in coordinating it with Cornell Kappa, Robert's brother. And he did this major retrospective, The Life of Robert Kappa. And so this was the poster from the exhibition. This was held at Otakyu Department Store in 1980. And this is the opening of that exhibition. And there's Cornell Kappa with Bob. And there's, again, Cornell and Bob. And then they're talking to the famous Japanese artist Okamoto Taro. And the reason why Okamoto Taro was there was because he was friends with Robert Kappa in Paris in the 1930s. And in fact, Robert Kappa's girlfriend, she named herself, she changed her name to Gerda Taro. She used his first name as her last name. So there was a really long relationship, so they decided, I guess, to invite him to the opening. Then he was doing a lot of stuff with Henri Cartier-Bresson. He had a very long relationship with this legendary photographer of the 20th century. He's many photojournalists' hero. He's probably like one of the top 3 photographers of the 20th century. And so Bob had a long relationship, and he was very close friends with him. And I've seen some of Bob's correspondence with him where Cartier-Bresson is writing him, Bob, when you come to Paris, let's come over for dinner. We miss you. And so he was really, really close. And Bob told me that every time he went to Paris, his first stop would be Cartier-Bresson's house, where they'd have dinner, and he would always bring wine over. And some of the names that he would drop, he would mention that came by also, like Robert Dono, people like that would come over. It would have just been amazing being a fly on the wall at one of those dinners. So this is Cartier-Bresson with Bob and Cartier-Bresson's wife, Martine Franks. She herself is a very famous photographer, a member of Magnum. And this picture was taken in Kiyomizu in Kyoto. I'm guessing in the late 70s or something. I can't say for sure. This picture is another party. There was many parties with Bob. This is Cartier-Bresson. He's in the center there. And next to him is his wife, Martine. And next to Martine is Watanabe Yoshio, another Japanese photo legend. Next to him is Hamaya Hiroshi profiled. Next to him is Iwamiya Takeji. And going over on the second from the right is, I'm sorry, from the left is Inari Tsuneo, who's also a very well-established, longtime photographer in Japan. He also collaborated with Ansel Adams on 2 different projects. The first one was in 1983, and the second one was in 1991, I think it was. And so Bob went to meet Ansel Adams in Carmel, California, and this was during that first meeting. And so that's Ansel right there, and that's his wife, Virginia. Andre Cortez is the father of photojournalism. He's one of the first guys to get a 35 millimeter Leica and go out and do street photographers in the 1920s. And nobody had done photography like that. He was the first guy to really do like this spontaneous, candid photography. He's just legendary. And so Bob brought him to Japan and did an exhibition at Pronton's, which no longer exists. And there's Andre Cortez right there. God, I wish I would have been at that opening. I would have loved to have met him. Elliot Erwitt. Bob's had a relationship with Elliot Erwitt since the 1960s. Very oddly, Elliot Erwitt and Bob died on the same day. So people were saying they're probably up there chatting and having a drink right now, you know. So here's Bob and Elliot. This was taken at Matsuya department store around the corner during the opening. And Elliot always wore a fish tie to his openings. I don't know if you can really see it, but the tie looks like a fish. Hosoi Eiko, another legendary Japanese photographer. The list goes on and on. He did a photo project about Gaudi, and so this was another exhibition, and they toured Japan. And this is Bob with Hosoi Eiko right there. Day in the Life of Japan. This is what brought me to this country. And Bob was heavily involved with that, and that's how I first met him. That took place in 1985. We did a group shot for the book in front of the Nijubashi, and this was right before the group shot happened, and there's Bob in all his glory. And this is the farewell party at the Moonchild Disco in Hilton Hotel in Shinjuku. William Klein, another great legend of photography. He was not only a photographer, he was a filmmaker, he was an artist. William Klein passed away this year at age 96, I think it was. And I've heard, Bob has told me all these stories about him, but Bob was very, very fond of him. So that's William Klein right there at the opening at Parco in 1991, his exhibition. Next to him is Hiroshi Hamaya, which is next. Bob had this incredibly close, lengthy relationship, friendship, business association with Hamaya Hiroshi, who's one of the great Japanese photographers of the 20th century. And they did a lot of exhibitions together, and they worked within the photo community of making this cultural bridge happen between Japan and the rest of the world. This is where they're planning one of his catalogs or something. And the dynamic between these two men was just incredible. I don't know if anybody in this room has ever met Hamaya, but he was the life of the party. And when we would hang out with him, we nicknamed him going to Hamaya University. And he found out about that, and he loved that, and so he would see us and go, come on down to Hamaya University. And this is what it was like hanging out with this guy. He was just a blast. There's Bob in the corner. This is a major retrospective of Hamaya's work, and that's the lady in the kimono is his wife. And next to her is Watanabe Yoshio, which I told about earlier. He's a legend. He was also the president, the director of the Tokyo Metropolitan Photography Museum for a while. And so these are just some of the other exhibitions that Bob produced. He produced over 300 exhibitions from the early 1970s up to the early 2000s. So Eugene Smith, when Eugene Smith was doing the Minamata project about the mercury poison of Minamata Bay, Bob was in close contact with him. He had his telephone number to his house and everything. He could call him anytime he wanted. And so after he finished shooting it, Bob produced his shows and everything. So he was close to Eugene Smith. Arnold Newman, wow, one of the great portrait photographers. Marc Ribot, one of the great Magnum photographers. Edouard Bouba, one of the great street photographers of Paris. David Douglas Dunklin and his project on Picasso. Ernst Haas, one of the first masters of color photography. And Bob and Haas were very, very close friends. Sarah Moon, the art fashion photographer. Again, Watanabe Yoshio. The Issei Jingu, he photographed it over a 60-year period. They changed the shrine every 20 years, and each time they did that, he photographed it. He was the only photographer ever allowed into the inner sanctum to photograph. Brassai. Martin Munkachi. This is amazing, this list of photographers he worked with. Herb Ritz. Edward Weston. Edward Weston wasn't alive, but still he worked with his family. Jacques Henri Lartigue, this great photographer, French photographer, and about less than 2 weeks before he was scheduled to come to Japan for the opening of this exhibition, he passed away. Eugene Atget, a late 19th century street photographer of Paris. Very rare for the time to do that kind of photography. Life magazine. Edward Steichen, to me, the best photographer of the 20th century. Alfred Stieglitz. Group shows, this is the Eyes of Time, the history of journalistic photography. This toured all over Japan. This is the best, the 20th century of photography. You can see Eugene Smith's picture up in the corner, the two children in the tunnel. For many of these exhibitions, Bob published catalogs. He published at least 50 of them. One day somebody's going to make a tally and figure out how many he did. And I'm just going to end with a few photographs of Bob. This is his apartment in Kudon, where many, many legendary parties happened. This is Bob in Nara. I don't know when this was taken. I'm guessing the 90s. I just really like this image. Bob in his Itabashi office when PPS was at its biggest and brightest. You notice the typewriter there. And then this is a photo I took of Bob about 2 years ago in his last office in Nihonbashi. Instead of a typewriter, he's got a computer there. And then we just figured out right now what this picture is. Bob had a very long association with Suntory, and they photographed him for one of their ad campaigns, and that's why he's got that whiskey on the table. I think, is that Hibiki? Can somebody read that? I'm not sure. Okay. And that's it.
Thanks, Torin, for all the work you did in putting that together. And also this collection of photographs on the table over there, which are fascinating from Bob's early days right through to the end. Okay, I'm going to invite anyone now who'd like to say a few words about Bob. We do have some people watching this or attending this online. So if anyone online wants to pay a short tribute to Bob, please press your hand button and Iwamura-san will identify you. But first, who in the room would like to kick off, say a few words about Bob? Yes? Just introduce yourself because it's being recorded.
But anyways, okay. Good evening. I haven't written anything, so I hope I can remember those things. Very long association I had with Bob Kirschenbaum, I can remember. Of course, not all of them. I met Bob, I think, in 2001. It happened, for the first time, I went to Open Table, and he was there with some other people. Then they were talking about the wine, so I knew a little about wine. Still, of course, I know. So I also said something about the wine. Then he said, why don't you join FMB committee? So I didn't know anything about the FMB committee. I was very new. But anyway, I accepted. Then I went there, and he was a co-chair. There was two Bob co-chair. I am sorry. WhatsApp audio. I am sorry. I silenced it. There was two Bob co-chair. I hope the other one, Bob Neff, is still okay, I hope. Then also there was two ladies, also with this first name of Sandra. So I hope both of them, I hope I are okay. I was very new and very, talking right. So those two ladies always were very dominant and very insistent, especially when we were talking about choosing a wine for the wine list. So when I was opposed very adamantly, and Bob said, Mehdi, this is a club, this is a family. You cannot say always, this is the right, this is the wrong. You have to accept this is a family, and in family you have to accept the harmony of the family. I don't know. Okay. Then, of course, it was okay. So later we went very friend, because always we choosing the wine, very good wine, and for very reasonable price for everybody to afford in the club. It was very good for, I think for about 10 years we were the same. In 2010, a new president asked me to co-chair the FMB committee with someone else, a Frenchman. And unfortunately, Bob was out, and I was there. So after 1 year, 2 years, I wanted to change the wine list. So also completely changed and bring new wine, good wine with reasonable and good price. And somebody came to me and said, and also in the changing list was Villa Maria. So, then somebody came to told me, Mehdi, if you change Villa Maria, me and Bob Kirschenbaum would resign from the club. So I said, okay, then I have to check with Bob Kirschenbaum because you are one. If it is one, it's okay, but if you're two, then very difficult. Then Bob said, I told him, yes, said, yes, I resign. I said, Bob, really you resign? He said, yes. I said, of course, I didn't change. I didn't change. Then today, that the other person, the other person, it was David Young, sent me this email to me. Mehdi, as I explained, I cannot come to Bob's memorial party or remembrance party tomorrow. I am sorry. Though I would very much like to do that, but I couldn't. But maybe I like to donate 2 bottles of Villa Maria to the event. If you can arrange it, I will pay you tomorrow. So please do that. So I accepted and I agreed, and I asked the club to arrange 2 bottles of Villa Maria to everybody. 1 bottle we drink for the Bob Kirschenbaum. So please, there is there. Please bring them, everyone. You have? So I think it's, just. Of course, too much to do, but anyway. Okay. Oh, not yet. Everybody have? For Bob Kirschenbaum. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have time to explain more, so finish. That's all. He was a friend, and I lost a good friend, and club lost a dedicated member. We remember him.
Thanks very much, Mehdi. I forgot to point out that on the table just to my left here, there is a glass of water and a glass of Villa Maria. This was always waiting for Bob on Friday night whenever he came into the club. The staff knew exactly what he wanted. Okay, Jeff, I see Jeffrey Tudor over there. Would you like to say a few words, Jeff? Can I bring the microphone to you, or if you can just? Are you okay now?
Yeah, you got it. My name is Jeff Tudor, and I've been a member of the Press Club since 1975, and I met Bob Kirschenbaum on one of my first visits to this club, and he guided me through my career as a PR man in Japan Airlines for many, many years, and I'm immensely grateful to him for his support over that time. He would often call and ask for help logistical help with some of his photography clients and colleagues, and through him I was privileged to meet a lot of the distinguished people that were introduced to you tonight by through that magnificent slideshow. That mentioned one particular project that Bob helped me with, and that was the Day in the Life of Japan, a magnificent photograph book which recorded, as it says, a day in the life of Japan. And it was a rainy day, as I remember, but it was an incredible project that people said could not be done. It involved flying in 150 of the world's leading photographers who eventually took one day of their stay in Japan to record what was going on. And believe me, dealing with 50 photographers was really like herding cats. Anyway, we got through that. As I recall, the group photograph of the photographers, which was taken in front of the Imperial Palace, was printed back to front in one of the publications. This would have been, there was a time in Japan when that would have been met with great despair and all-round punishment. Fortunately, very few people noticed, much to the relief of people like all concerned, especially Bob, who played an important behind-the-scenes role in making the project viable. He was one of the greatest mentors I've ever dealt with. I'm immensely grateful to him, and may his soul rest in peace.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. I forgot to mention that Bob's brother David lives in New York, and it's some ungodly hour there, so he may or may not be watching this proceeding. But anyway, if you are there, David, welcome to the memorial. Right, who else would like to speak? I'm sure, yes? Are you? Dan Sloan, yes. Our former president, Dan Sloan, would like to say something.
Thank you. I'll keep this very brief. Bob and Jeff were lords of food and beverage, and other committees in our more fractious days. And their humor, their equanimity, and their good souls kind of kept us going in the right direction. Beyond that, Bob was like a touchstone in the club, in the old club, meaning in the Denki building, and someone you would pretty much know was in the corner at around 6 o'clock with a glass of wine, and you could sit down and he would smile, and you knew that the kind of regulars were going to be coming in, but he was a touchstone to the club's great history, the club's still great future, and he did a tremendous amount of work for this organization. And for that, I'm deeply thankful, and I know that the comments and the presentations we've seen so far not only highlight his contribution to this organization, but what a great professional he was. So here's to you, Bob.
Okay, thank you. I see Yoda-san in the front rank there. Would you like to say a few words, Yoda-san?
Thank you, Anthony. There are several the food and beverage department staff who worked with Bob Kirschenbaum. The Kuryu-san, bar manager, Hattori-san, and also Himemiya-san, and also Saito-san worked at the sales department. As Vasily-san said, the food and beverage operation is the most difficult operation in the club management. And I was a general manager since April 2001 until March 2008, and I have really enjoyed working with the Food and Beverage Committee because members always complain. The quality of food is not good, quantity is not good, price is too high, variety is too small, and service is slow, bad manner, whatever. So members come to the FCCJ to complain about food and beverage operation. And it was the Food and Beverage Committee who supported the management. Whenever there's a complaint, I'm asked to explain. I say, well, I'm very sorry. This has been approved by the Food and Beverage Committee. If you want to talk, complain to the Bob Kirschenbaum, Bob Neff, and they did. So still, I believe Bob has been telling one of the mistakes FCC has made was outsourcing the food and beverage operation. And I believe it is. And when Anthony Rory and I visited him in Saitama last month, he was always concerning. And Anthony asked Bob, where do you want to stay? He said, here. I thought it is Japan. No, it is FCCJ. He really loved FCCJ, and I hope Anna, who is managing the food and beverage, will improve. Thank you.
That's Bob was the very antithesis of that. He very rarely complained, even at the end when he was in hospital and suffering quite badly at times. I never heard him complain. He always was very positive in his outlook. Okay, now, yes, Togon-san.
Thank you. Yoda-san said FCCJ member comes to the club to complain, and I did. I made a lot of complaint to Bob Kirschenbaum about the price of martini. And I complained that the price of martini should be 500 yen, definitely. And he agreed, and he did his action. So I appreciate his generosity. I met Bob more than 20 years ago at the main bar when I joined this club. And I was impressed. He was such an extraordinary man. He could discuss, he could spend 2 hours discussing white wine and apple pie. But at the same time, I discovered he was a guardian of a F&B operation. So I respected him and I appreciated his activities. And I also joined his Benkyokai Friday evening. He welcomed everybody, no matter what ideology or political party they belong. And one time I invited my friend, right-wing activist and left-wing activist, to the same table. And Bob Kirschenbaum, he appreciated, and we had very, very good conversations at the same table among left-wing and right-wing activists with Bob Kirschenbaum. And later, he told me, when he was running his company, he hired former left-wing, radical left-wing activist student, because he said, those activists, right-wing or left-wing, they have the energy, they have a commitment, and they are intelligent. So if they can join his company, they will make a great contribution. So I respected his insight, and I miss him. So I really want to say thank you, Bob-san. And the price of martini is still, I hope, the 500 yen.
Okay, Calden, I see you're raising your hand. Calden Ashari, former president of the club.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I started to know Bob through the correspondence table on the former building, and this building, he was always there. Like the chair is like his chair is like a crown for him. When we come Friday evening, Friday night, or even Sunday, if he's not there, we feel a really big space. And this space will continue. We will always see Bob's spirit there with us. And I had really always nice talk with him. He knows about everything. Sometimes I ask him about political background, and I was surprised. He gave me really very good understanding of what's going on in Japan. Of course, that's because he's longer timer here. And I think he knew what's going on in this country. And in addition to what all you said about him of great things, I could notice he has very sharp answers, and always his answers are surprising. So one time I was asked to moderate an event about wine. And the speakers, 2 speakers, world-class critics of wine, I think from England. And they asked me to moderate the event because they didn't find somebody. And I was chatting with Bob. I said, Bob, they asked me about this wine thing, moderation, and I know nothing about wine except the color, red or white. And he said, that's why you have to moderate this event. Because if you don't understand it, you will ask dumb questions, and that's how they explain the wine to everybody. And that's what happened, actually, and everybody said the event was really good, because I told them, how do you do this, how can we know that? And they explained the basics of wine. So that was really one of the good things. Another sharp answer, one time he asked me, oh, how's your life? How's your love life? I said, not good. I said, why? I said, she disappeared. He said, good for you. I said, what? Why? He said, you will know later. And then after like 2 months, he saw me with the person. I said, oh, what happened? I said, oh, she's back. He said, good for you. I said, how come good for me in both cases? He said, because in love, there's no logic, basically. It just happens like that. So we really miss Bob, and we miss his entertainment comments and his time here. He served the club. When I was president, he helped me a lot in making many good decisions, and he was really an advisor. So we miss you, Bob, and we hope you are in a good shape now, and we will meet you sometime in the future. Thank you.
Is Iwamura-san there, because he's supposed to be tracking down people online with comments to make? Iwamura-san, do we have anyone online who wants to make? No, we don't. Okay, all right. I'm sure we have others in the room. So, Isabel, would you like to say something?
I'd like to say something, actually.
Sorry, who's that?
That was me online, actually. Sorry, I can't see how to raise my hand. It's Mike Selby in London.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Hi there. So I'm Mike Selby. Hey, hi everybody. I first met Bob in 1970 when I was 20 years old. So I'm going a little bit like he was when I met him, actually. In 1968, PPS became the representative in Japan of my family business, which was Rex Features, the photo agency based in London. And in 1970, having failed to get into university, I found myself a little job for a year teaching English conversation in Tokyo. So I set off, bought myself a very sober three-piece suit and went to Japan. And Bob sort of took me under his wing. I couldn't really have hoped for a better introduction to Japan. He was only 14 years older than me, so he seemed he seemed older and more mature to me at the time. I was 20, he was only in his mid-30s, but his business was already well established. I think he was getting the Osaka office going around then, because one of the things I did in 1970 was got a couple of tickets from him to go to Banpaku, the 1970 Expo in Osaka, where I went right at the end when photographers who were now not making any money at it anymore were resorting to selling sort of souvenir necklaces made of seeds and beads and things around the place. Like, Steve, were you there? I can't remember now. Anyway, there's not much really to say. Bob remained, PPS remained the representative of Rex Features, and we did a little bit of reciprocal stuff, but it was mainly one-way traffic for a very long time. Let's say every time I left Japan, I went there for a year. The plan was to go for a year, but I ended up getting married there, and I stayed for 4 years, and then went back to the UK. But I've visited many times since, and every time one of the key stops has always been drinks at the Foreign Correspondence Club with Bob, and then out for what usually was, in later years, just a fairly sober, or relatively sober, but usually excellent sushi meal. And in earlier days, a fair amount of boozing around. Well, he seemed to know everybody in Tokyo, and everybody in Tokyo knew him, particularly restaurateurs and bar owners and things like that. So I remember a place in Shinjuku called Nozomi, where he used to go a lot in the early days in the 1970s and maybe in the 80s, run by an elderly couple. The old chap affected a beret. I think he was presumably fancied himself as some kind of an artist. And we used to go to Golden Gaishi, Yonben Shokocho, Yokocho, and places like that to just, hit the bottle. As I say, a great introduction to the more entertaining aspects of Tokyo life. And I really will miss Bob. I mean, I'm going to be arriving there in a few days' time, and I was hoping, obviously, to go and see him, and now I'm going to have to wait. I'll really miss Bob, and look forward to seeing him in the next life.
Thank you. I'm sure everyone knows tonight that Bob has been buried in the Foreign Community Cemetery in Yokohama, if you wish to visit his grave. Isabel, you're about to come forward, I think, and I...
Mr. Lowry. Yes, please. You're first. Yes. Thank you. I'll make this very brief. My name's Isabel Reynolds. In 2020, I sort of suddenly and unexpectedly became president of the club, which I found a very stressful experience at the height of the pandemic. And one day, Bob just invited me for a drink in the bar on one of the days when the bar was able to be open. And he just listened very patiently to all my problems and was very, very comforting and just said, you know, you've just started, it'll be all right. And he was right. So that's how I think of him. I only knew him in the last few years of his life. So I'm very grateful to Torrin Boyd, who did this beautiful exhibition, and to learn so much about his fantastic career and exciting life in his early days. But to me, he was just very much a rock and someone who could always be relied on to provide a comforting word in a very difficult time. That's it.
I think a rock puts it very well. Okay, we have two more people online, I think. Who's sorry? Monica.
Hello.
Well, I don't
Hello.
know. Can you fix that? Sorry, I don't quite understand what I'm supposed to do. I don't have a computer here. Monica.
What do you? Yes.
Okay, you are on. Please go ahead and speak.
Okay. So I met Bob in 2002. I was his parents' aide in United States. And I know David is not able to be here, but he will watch after. And Bobby was a wonderful person. I remember how he was kind to his parents. And I want to speak about family here because he lives in Japan, but he used to call his parents every night. And it made them so happy. It was wonderful to see how they are kind to each other. So I want to say this to you to know about how Bob was with family. They used to love him a lot. He was very, very important to them. That's all what I want to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Peter Langen. Peter, come in, please. Peter?
Yeah, hi, Anthony. I just wanted to say I was very touched by your words about Bob and being the kind uncle, as I always felt that way towards him. You know, as Isabel pointed to, being involved in the management of the club can be very stressful at times, but I always found Bob's table was a place I gravitated towards just because of his genuine kindness. And I think, as you said earlier, just a genuinely nice man. And I really miss those, you know, chats with him. Just a toast from me. God bless you, Bob. You're very well remembered and loved. Thank you.
Okay, I know that one of our staff members, Hanif-san, who's a bit of an institution here too, would love to say just a few words about Bob, if we can get him in for a moment. Would you? Thank you. Yes, please. And Mary, I see you sitting in the corner. Would you like to say something in the meantime? Yes. Well, why not? It'll take a few minutes for him to come in.
To me, Bob symbolizes good mentorship, continuity. He had passion for food and the bottom line. So he could be very, very stubborn about choice of foods and menus, but he made concessions. If it works for the club, if people are going to enjoy this, and we have a little profit at the end of it. Not much, because this is a membership club. This is what he kept reminding us of. And I will always remember those lessons I learned at the corner table and under him in the F&B. I was many years on the F&B under his tutelage. I hope I learned a lot, and I'd like to share, but I'm not quite the mentor yet in this club that he was all those years. I'm really going to miss his guidance, and I think we do have to treasure that culture and the continuity, which is so important to a club, and that we have with us many wonderful staff that also remember this continuity, and he was sort of the guardian, and somebody else referred to him as the guardian, and I think he was, and I treasure that, everything that he did for those decades. And really, not just the wine. This whole club was his passion, you know, along with the photography, the wonderful business that he ran for all those years. So God bless. I wish I'd seen a bit more of him in the last days. You know, actually, I couldn't join the last visit to when he had moved to the home, and Bradley was there, and everybody came back and said, Mary, he's looking so much better, you know. And you know what? Actually, if we can remember him, really enjoying the company of his friends, which is what he loved more than anything else, I think we remember him well. So thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Yes, Hanif's son, please. Hanif remembers Bob possibly better than any of us do. Hanif, just a few words.
Hello, sir. So when I hear the news, I really very surprised that he's gone. So all of us, we are going to miss him all the way. So he was a great man. We would talk always, very, very fine. I have no problem with him for this 40 years I've been here. So very fine. I hope everything is okay with him. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Greg, I wonder whether, do you want to say anything? Oh yes, please. Doesn't.
Hello. This is one of my probably most unfavorite thing to do, but for Bob I will. My name is Bruce Osborne, and I am the chair of the exhibition committee. And Bob was one of my supporters very much. I first met him in 1980 when I had an exhibition in Japan. And at that time, I wasn't really planning to move to Japan yet, but one thing or another happened. It was a great show. PPS sold 3 of my photos for commercials to Sony for posters, and one thing like the next. 3 months later, I was back in Japan. And like many other foreign photographers here, we were always invited to his opening parties for the exhibitions, and we had a chance to meet so many wonderful photographers. And as everybody said, he was like an uncle. We thought about his father. We thought, wait, he's not that much older than us, is he? So we realized he's actually our uncle. But I can remember one time it was really a pleasure for me because I love Elliot Erwitt. He's one of my favorite photographers. And I was having an exhibition in Roppongi, and the reception that night, Bob popped over with Elliot Erwitt. And that was just an honor beyond belief. So anyway, he did so much in our lives to share. Like they said, he was tough, but that toughness had a sweetness always to him. And yeah, he's unforgettable. We cannot replace him, but he'll always be here. So thank you, Bob.
Yeah, irreplaceable and unforgettable. I think those describe Bob pretty well. Iwamura-san, I think you wanted to say something very briefly, or not? Yes, why not? You knew Bob very well indeed. Just something so.
Thank you very much. One thing is I should talk to about Mr. Bob Kirschenbaum is I always asking about FCCJ history. Mr. Kirschenbaum, is this correct or not? Is this right or wrong? He always give me answered me the right direction and answered, and then I always learn about FCCJ history from him, always. Thank you very much.
Anthony, I can't seem to get the hand.
Hello, Grady Loy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead if you wish to say something.
Just very briefly, I think most of what I would have to say has been said very eloquently by a lot of the friends that have spoken earlier. But one thing I do want to say about Bob that impressed me is that, the press club it's an exciting place. It's a vibrant place. We often get, excited. We often get into quarrels and contentious things. And one of the things that I always found very helpful about Bob being a friend was that if I went and perhaps I was full of anger or, unhappiness about some other member that was doing something that I thought was wrong, Bob had a good way of cooling me down for that. I mean, he was, I think, in a way, without necessarily trying to be overt about it, he was a very sort of an ethical and thoughtful person, so that he could look at another person's viewpoint, make it a bit more relatable, and somewhat defuse some of the tension and the problems. And I think as a consequence of his mediation in a lot of different things, we probably avoided a lot of trouble that we might have had down the years. And that's something about him that I wanted to say. The other thing that I wanted to say is, and I think, it's been kind of alluded to in a way, is that he was a very kind and generous person. He didn't always talk about it, but I think he helped, among the staff and the members. I think he helped a very great many people with, with advice and introductions and, even little help sometimes. And he never would say a word about it. But you just knew that, he was out there, looking out after people, and not always, the great and famous people, but, quite often people that were sort of on the edges. And I always found it one of the most refreshing things I found about being with him is that, well, he could have a sharp wit when he wanted to. I didn't very often find him making me feel, worse about people than I did to begin with. He generally gave me some insight that made me think better of my fellow club members. And that's something that, you don't really, I guess, appreciate it until it's gone. And I won't go on beyond that. I think all of the other things about him that I really liked have been said more eloquently. But we're going to miss him. He was quite an extraordinary person. And wherever you are, Bob, I hope you're having a good time.
Randy, as acting president, perhaps you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. So, although I've been kind of a long time guest of members for 25 years, I actually just joined the club 5 years ago, and Bob was one of the first, actually the first of the sort of old guard people to welcome me to the club. We had some nice conversations. He encouraged me to join the board, and really, really great guy. The last time I saw him, I'm trying to remember when it was, perhaps the beginning of this year or even a full year ago. I was coming up from the subway and he was resting on one of the benches in the B1 of the building, I think unable to come up to the club, and I spoke with him for a while down in the B1 of this building. And really sad to see him go, and I wish I had a chance to know him better.
Okay, I think we're coming fairly close to winding up. Anyone else? Nihongo Daiju comment? Anyone else wish to make comment? Bob, someone mentioned that Bob was very good at making friends outside the club, and I remember towards the end, when Bob was not so mobile, I used to accompany him down to B1 in this building, and there's a restaurant called Roti, and Bob's favourite was hotate with garlic, and we used to drink good whiskey and eat the hotate. And the owner came dashing up to me a few days ago and said, "Where's your friend?" And I had to break the news to him, and he seemed heartbroken that Bob had passed away. But that was Bob. Okay, if there's no one else, I think that's... one thing I should mention is that the house newspaper, the #1 Shimbun, will be appearing in a few days' time, I think, and there'll be very extensive tributes to Bob by many club members in there, so please read your #1 Shimbun closely. So if there's no one else that wishes to say anything, I will just say again, what can I say? I almost feel that now that I want to go into the bar and join Bob. It's Friday night, and Bob was always there in the bar. And somehow I just can't quite take it in that he's not there anymore. But of course we will. So Bob, all the best. We will meet again, I hope, if I'm privileged enough to meet you. And thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Richard, hi.
テストテストテスト。